Hello students, this lecture is on the structure of muscle. If you will remember back to one of our early topics where we discussed structural organization, remember that at the smallest level there were atoms and molecules, then we worked our way up to cells, and then from cells to tissue, and from tissue up to organ, and then from organs up to organ systems, and then organ systems eventually formed the whole organism, and in our case the human being. So we're going to be following that pattern when we in our beginning early lecture about the muscle. And so here we're going to start off looking at that. Here we start off, here is the whole tissue level. Here is the muscle. Here is the whole muscle. So right here, here is the tissue level. And then that muscle tissue is broken down to what are called fascicles. And then within the fascicles finally are the muscle fibers. And these muscle fibers, these long tubes, they are the muscle cell. So in this case, from here we have worked our way from the whole tissue level, from muscle, down to the cell level, the muscle fiber. And so I want you to remember that the muscle fiber is synonymous with the muscle cell. And in order to start to understand how the muscles work, we will have to understand how the muscle cell works. And then once we understand how that muscle cell works, we'll relate that back to the whole tissue level and to how the whole muscle ends up creating force and creating contraction. Now let's take a look at that. Here is the whole muscle. Here we're at the muscle tissue level. And that muscle tissue is broken down to what are called fascicles. And fascicles, that's still at the tissue level, but the fascicles, they are made up of these muscle fibers. And it's these muscle fibers, at that point, we're now at the cell level. So let's blow that up and take a look at the muscle fiber cell. Here, so here's the cell of the muscle. Let's call it a muscle fiber. And notice that it has a membrane surrounding it. It has a nucleus that will direct the expression of muscle proteins and creation of muscle proteins. And notice very critically that this muscle fiber cell is filled up with myofibrils. So at this point, the myofibril, we're starting to work our way down towards the molecular level. Another key word here is sarcolemma. Sarcolemma is another word for the membrane of the muscle, the membranes of the muscle cell. Remember, all cells are enclosed by a membrane. So if we're going to continue to look at that. And we're going to take a close look at these skeletal muscle fibers. We're going to be studying the muscle cell quite in depth. Notice that it has what are called multiple nuclei and many mitochondria. This allows the muscle cell to produce all the muscle proteins that it needs, and also the mitochondria there to produce energy for the muscle cell. And then that muscle cell, it will contain three critical structures. Number one, the muscle cell is full of myofibrils. And we'll be taking a closer look at the myofibrils in this lecture. And then in the future, we'll be talking about two key structures called the sarcoplasmic reticulum and the T-tubules. And we'll get to those in another lecture. So, now, again, taking a look, this is a blow-up of the muscle fiber, a blow-up of the muscle cell. Again, notice that it's filled with these myofibrils. If we take a look at those myofibrils, the myofibrils then, when we take a closer look at them, they are composed of repeating units called sarcomeres. And ultimately those sarcomeres will be composed of what are called thick and thin myofilaments. And these are actually the contractile proteins of the muscle cell. At this point, when we get down to the thick and thin myofilaments, we are truly have worked our way down to the molecular level of the cell. Taking a look at that, this now, in this case, this is a single myofibril. Now remember, the muscle fiber cell itself will be filled up with millions of these myofibrils. The repeating unit called the sarcomere it's a repeating unit from length to length. So from here to here is a sarcomere. And that repeating unit, it continues on and on and on the whole length of the myofibril. And what will happen in contraction is that sarcomere will shorten. And as the repeating unit the sarcomere shortens, then the myofibril shortens, and when the myofibril shortens, the muscle fiber shortens, and when the muscle fiber shortens, the whole muscle shortens, and you get contraction. Now, what's going to be causing that shortening of those sarcomeres is going to be the interaction of what are called thick filaments and thin filaments. Here you see, here are the thick filaments, and the thick filaments are primarily composed of a molecule called myosin. The thin filaments, here are the thin filaments, they're primarily composed of a molecule called actin. And what will happen is that the thick filaments, these little myosin heads, the myosin of the thick filaments, it will bind onto the actin and it will pull on the actin. Just imagine like if your hands were pulling on a rope. And it will, as it pulls on the actin, that will cause the sarcomere to shorten, and that ultimately will be the basis, the molecular basis of contraction. Thank you.